Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. Thank you to everybody who's streaming in from across the internet right now as we speak. We're on 12 different platforms. So if you're on Twitch, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, you're on YouTube, wherever you're at, welcome and thank you for joining us today. So we are going to be talking about debates. We're going to ask the question, do debates even matter? And we're going to answer that. And it's a mixed message on that one. So we'll go into that and give you a few debate prep tips as well. But before we do that, with the one and the only co-host of this program and our co-pilot on the journey to Political Trade Secrets, Sean Bartley.
Hey, good morning to you. Good morning to everyone listening and watching out there. Really do appreciate it. Looking forward to a great conversation today and answering a question that not enough campaigns ask, if you ask me. Do these things even matter?
Do debates matter? Do forums matter? Do I don't know, whatever they all get called debates, but are they debates?
Exactly. That's something we're going to unpack a little bit today too. So,
do distractions from fundraising calls really matter?
They do, and not in a positive way. But we're gonna get into all of that. So really looking forward to it, and just going to have a great conversation about what makes a difference for you as candidates. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, and if you want to join the conversation, you can do so by posting a comment, a question, in whatever platform you're listening in. You can post a comment or question, but you can also a really great way to do this. We've talked a lot about texting in the last 2 weeks. Yesterday we did our 8 pro tips for political texting. We did an episode on fundraising texting with James Martin, which was excellent and highly recommend people check it out. By the way, if you want to know about these things, if you want to have an easy place to go look about what we are up to, we send out now on Thursdays, we send out our weekly insider email. So we just send out an email and it has all the different programs that we have done in the last 2 weeks that we want to make sure that you have an easy way to get to. So to get one of those and to be a part of our Political Trade Secrets Insiders, you can go to politicaltradesecrets.com, get exclusive stuff, and be in the know. You can also text me personally if you go to this phone number right here. I will get your text and then we'll send back a link. You'll click on it and you'll opt in, and then you'll get all the freshest political trade secrets like as they're happening. We're sending them out. We just sent out a text a moment ago letting people know about this episode. So please do that. So if you are ever wondering, what's going on in the news, you want to know somebody's one of our opinions on it, we might be sending that stuff out as well. And Sean, if someone really if they're out there, they want to get on the ballot. That was a question we had on our clubhouse on Monday. How do you even get on the ballot? That's a big question that people have. What would you say to people?
Well, that is a great question, and nobody is better in the business of getting you onto the ballot than Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. Look, in well over half of the states, there is a signature gathering component to you yourself as a candidate getting onto the ballot. And then in other states, it is the way to actually stop or change legislation, particularly in states that, like California, for example, where getting reasonable legislation through the state legislature is not necessarily an option. It is the thing to do. So
that's about the only way you can protect yourself. I think Uber and Lyft, they had all those companies had to pass a citizens initiative here recently, and we're working on that. They're constantly, you live in a state like that where they're just pounding you with terrible legislation. You might be an industry that needs to actually go to the people and let the people be in charge.
Yeah, and another thing people don't think about here, first, no one knowing the rules to get on the ballot. That's one
Hmm.
thing. And next, it's putting the best face forward for your organization, for your campaign. And that's really something, those are two things that Grassfire really focuses on. And so, if you want to be represented well and have that be out there for you, then reach out to Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. And you get one shot at a first impression. You get one shot to make the ballot. Make it count with Grassfire.
Yep. There's when you're hiring lots of people, there is a lot of ways for things to go wrong, and this industry has had a long history of having problems and lawsuits and fraud, etc. You know, if there's a lot of these firms will hire felons, and they will make up signatures. They will pretend like they're knocking on doors when they're not. One of the things I appreciate about Grassfire is it was started for people like us, campaign managers, general consultants out there who always felt like you were playing Russian roulette whenever you hired somebody to do your petitions or do your canvassing. You had no idea if somebody was actually knocking on doors or if they're just sitting at a Wendy's, clicking on names that either on their paper list when it's a paper list, or if it's in the app, they're just clicking on the names. And Grassfire has systems to track all that to make sure. Also, they do background checks on every single person, and really, their intention is to bring integrity to the process,
Yep.
because the truth is that this is all about freedom of speech, and it's about our First Amendment right to petition our government, and that's really important to Grassfire. So people should check them out. They're trying to elevate the game when it comes to petitions and canvassing and live calling. During the pandemic, live calling was a pretty big thing. People
Yep.
wanted to actually talk. That was a pretty cool thing that came about. So if you would like to check them out, please do so. And then I'm going to go back and put the number back up if people want to send us a text and join the conversation. You can also post your questions. I get them right here on my cell phone if you want to post any questions right now. So, raise your hand if you've ever wondered about do debates matter? That is the question that we're asking today. And if you can't raise your hand right now, just mentally think of raising your hand, and we'll get it. The reason actually why we're doing this is a number of candidates have actually asked us about this. A number of people thinking about running for office have asked us about it. There's some people, they may not even run for office because they are deathly afraid of the idea of actually having to do debates. And they may be interested to find out what our thoughts are about do they even matter. And my answer, I'll just jump to the end, is no and maybe yes is
Yeah.
my answer to that.
Yeah. That's great. I really said whether debates matter or not depends on the situation. And there's a
Yep.
lot of factors that go into it. And they're, whatever the scale is, it's not normally thought about too much.
Unless you are really a candidate in the general election of a presidential election, it probably doesn't matter too much, and it's more of an opportunity for you to blow yourself up in front of people
Yep.
as a candidate. Not to be too violent with that, but that's really what there's an opportunity to do, is really end your campaign,
Well,
because no one's really paying attention until someone causes some fireworks.
exactly. So, let's think about some memorable moments from debates. Probably
Hmm.
the best place to start on this, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and President Reagan supplies two of them for us. Okay. In 1980, he asked, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" And that was like the question. And you really couldn't avoid it. And it's partially because President Carter had basically asked the same question 4 years ago, and things got worse. So
Yep.
that was one
And
of
and that and that debate was really, as far as history goes, we're not going to be in that kind of a situation probably ever again.
you know
So with the advent of more voting by mail and whatnot, that's going to have an effect on debates also. A lot of the election is done a month beforehand. At that time, that wasn't a thing. And the debate wasn't even quite sure if it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it got pushed until the last week of the election. And so it was right there, right as people were making decisions. And there was only one debate. Carter had successfully pretty much avoided having a debate. And at that point, um, it was right when people were thinking about it, and when Reagan reframed the whole election to that, and it was so obvious to people when they answered it for themselves that was really a deciding factor in that election. Now, I say that from looking back on history. There are probably a million other things that were important in that campaign, but for that campaign, it was a big deal. And then, if fast forward 4 years, and it's actually three, I would say, Reagan moments.
Yep.
If you fast forward 4 years from then, his first debate
Yeah.
didn't go so well.
His first debate was perhaps an unmitigated disaster. I mean, it was pretty bad, and really, and it goes into some of the things we actually talk about in debate prep. Like, it was too much in the weeds and numbers and trying to remember things and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
And, trying to win on points. And one thing that we might as well make it clear a few times today, huh?
Yeah.
Which is people are not sitting at home scoring you based on, oh yeah, that's a great technique in debating, or oh, they didn't use whatever this was or that was, or they're not getting into that. It's like, oh, how did this feel to me, or who do I like more, or whatever the question is they're answering. Who's talking to me more? That's what they're
It's
answering.
really, yeah, if there's an emotional connection, we talked about this with Jason Meath on Tuesday when we had him on, talking about Hollywood on the Potomac and his background in film. Making that emotional connection is really going to make a difference in the for the audience. And ultimately, you I've had this experience where we've been working for an incumbent, and the incumbents, professional, whether it's congressional or gubernatorial or whatever, their staff come in and they have this big binder of information, and they just are so insistent that that person memorizes all that stuff, and you have to get all these different things right. And it's amazing to me because I think they intellectually know that this isn't a good pathway.
Yeah.
Normally in a debate, and we'll talk a little bit more of this as we go, I usually have a one sheet for
Yep.
the person, and it has all the information that they need. We want to keep the strategy pretty simple as we go into the debate, and we want to be able to connect with people, because if you're trying to remember things, you're disconnected from the people. And Ronald Reagan in his first debate was disconnected from the people. And Roger Ailes talks about this in his book, You Are the Message. I know we're not supposed to even mention Roger Ailes anymore because he's absolutely canceled, but the book was written a long time ago, and it has interesting stories about the debate prep for Reagan. And Roger Ailes had been brought in during the process. He wasn't around for the first debate, but he had been, he's a TV ad guy at the time, and then he'd gotten into network media as well. And they brought him in, and he was watching the process, and he saw all these propeller heads trying to get the president to remember all these stats and data and everything else, and he could see that it was definitely affecting the president. Of course, then the previous debate had affected him as well. So he started the whole thing of let Reagan be Reagan, and just let him speak to whatever he saw made sense. Give him an opportunity to practice without being interrupted, and that's how they did it. And of course, famously, as right before he was about to go out, Reagan turned to Ailes and said, "What do you think about this?" And he gave him a joke that I think he'd used many times
Hmm.
before, but he said, this is what I was thinking about saying. And Ailes was like, "Well, that's great. That's perfect, Reagan." Of course, at the moment of that saying the joke that I will not hold against my opponent his youth and inexperience in this campaign. Everybody knew that the campaign was over in that
Yeah.
moment. And I recommend people go back to the audio podcast. I did an interview with Mort Kondracki, who
Yes.
was one of the panelists, one of the people who was asking the questions in that debate. And he talks about the actual moment that happened and how it was clear, even on Mondale's face, that Mondale knew the whole thing was done in that moment. Now, it probably was already done, really, because there's a million things going into it. But in that moment, there was a really clear understanding for people that the election was over and Reagan was reelected.
Yeah. Well, and so those are a couple where the performance in the debate, and I think we've also talked about Donald Trump in his first debate with the slew of Republican candidates when Megyn Kelly asked the first question, and he basically diffused that issue for the really the rest of the time. He really
That's the one other caveat. Debates matter if Donald Trump's involved.
yes.
And if it's in a primary or if it's in a general election, they do matter. And even for that, he did really well in that moment. So I say he became president when he said only Rosie O'Donnell in response, because if you're a Republican, a conservative, independent, you had a guttural laugh response to that because nobody likes Rosie O'Donnell, and it completely reframed the whole thing. And you got that this guy could move energy around. But then you move to the first debate in the general election this last time, and I would say that had an impact on the election, and not in a way that we would have hoped. Looking back on it now, of course, it was very much ganging up on the president. However, it just had an impact, and
Yeah.
that's one of those things that who knows? I think actually after the debates this time, a lot of Republicans, at least then, were thinking, "Do we want to do these presidential debates anymore?" Because it seems like it's completely rigged against us.
Yeah. Well, and we got flashes of that in 2012 when Candy Crowley corrected Mitt Romney. Turned out she was wrong.
Yep.
And, it didn't matter at the end of the day.
I think about, was it the second debate? I can't remember her name, or the third debate. It was the third debate. The lady who she'd had some of her family had given money to Democrats, and I cannot think of her name right now. People in the comments can let me know. The third moderator, and she didn't put her thumb on the scale to the level that really any of the past couple of elections the moderators had. She asked very liberally slanted questions. However, by not being a participant and not being over the top for one side, she got a lot of credit for having played it more down the middle, even though 20 years ago it would have been viewed as one of the most partisan moderations of a debate.
And you're talking in the 2020 debate?
2020 debates. I just forgot her name.
Yeah, Rachel Welker from NBC. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. Even we said, hey, that was as good as it was going to get from a moderator, which is something to remember depending on what your situation is. So, look, we're talking a lot about presidential debates because they're memorable for a couple of reasons, which we'll get into in just a second. It's also happened in some Senate races where it's made a difference. Richard Murdoch in Indiana was talking about abortion. That was the thing that was a factor of many that ended up having him narrowly lose. Senator Mark Udall in Colorado. Again, this is another example of a
media person getting involved and having an impact.
Yeah.
Who knows? She might even be watching.
Yeah.
But Mark Uterus.
Yeah, exactly. And we talk about being interesting. I mean, that was sticky. You heard it, you couldn't unhear it.
Yeah.
And
it framed him, and he was from then on, Mark Uterus, still to this day. I don't think he became really pretty irrelevant very fast.
Yeah.
after that. But what I think is true in each of these, it wasn't the actual debate that um, people were watching. It was that something happened in the debate that then gets into the larger news.
Yep.
So if you're in those situations, ultimately, I can't think of even a Senate race where the debate was a positive thing, like somebody came out of it in a positive way. Now, of course, if you were able to lay a hit on your opponent and you cause them to stumble, that's ultimately what you're doing. You're trying to draw blood during the debate. And I have pursued that strategy before. And sometimes the press isn't interested. No one really cares. You can punch, and it may not yield anything. And, then you come up empty handed. But I cannot think of a Senate race where somebody just was so outshone everybody else that they did well and
Yeah.
they won because of that.
It's almost always because of the other person doing terribly. Jim
Mhm.
Bunning in Kentucky nearly losing because of people thinking he was too old and him leaving the debate early.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really, honestly, you just think about all these. But the first one, you have a note in our notes for the show about Nixon Kennedy, which of
Yes.
course is the first presidential televised debate. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it really got to the point of, right. So going back, people say if you listen to it on the radio, people who listened to it on the radio thought Nixon clearly won. The people watching on TV said Kennedy won. Well, part of it was around just how they appeared
Yeah.
and they looked. And so there is something to be said for being on the same stage together. So that is a factored away. Like,
Mhm.
is it elevating you or in your race? So that is something to think about. And then also kind of how the optics appear for people that are paying attention. Now you got to remember, people need to be paying attention,
Mhm.
or it doesn't matter. Um, Back to that, but yeah. So I think that was one of the things on the Nixon Kennedy debate
Well,
is,
Nixon famously didn't want to wear makeup,
yep,
and Kennedy did. And Nixon looked like he was a sweaty mess.
yep,
And that's going to happen for people. The lights are really bright when you're on an actual televised stage. I don't think a lot of people realize that. If you're in practice, so we're going to get into the practice stuff in a little bit. If you're doing debate prep, you do want to create as many of the conditions, and that's one that I think a lot of people forget. You got to put a lot of lights on you if you're going to be doing it on a stage. If you're going to be doing it televised, likely there's going to be a lot of light in your eyes, and that can have an impact on your ability to think and think on your feet.
yeah. And we're getting some great comments here. Pat says, "Where's the beef?"
Mhm.
And now, I think Wendy's did a better job of asking that question than I think it was Walter Mondale who was
Yeah.
asking that. And but a great thing that was tried to bring in some. And guess what? These things do also fall flat
Mhm.
when you try it,
Some
particularly.
candidates shouldn't try humor. One
Mhm.
in particular is Hillary Clinton. When she tries
Oh boy,
humor, she usually shoots herself in the foot.
yeah, it's generally cringeworthy. And
Mhm.
then Alex.
Kamala Harris constantly
Oh,
cackling and laughing and at tragedies.
yeah.
I don't know. I think she sniffs laughing gas before she goes into public.
Alex asks, so is it okay if we candidates dodge debates and go knock on doors instead? Well, we'll get into that. First, it's really you want to be. I just want to address the dodging of debates. We're going to get into what even debates are here and talk about that. You just want to really choose powerfully if this is something your campaign should do or not,
Yeah.
and really take a look at it from that vantage point.
And
Because
set some criteria for what
you know,
you're going to do and what you're not going to do, and actually live by that. And if you need to change it, okay, but don't change it every single time. Then you're making an individual decision for every single one, and it is it will ultimately this is the challenge. If you're anything other than a candidate in the general election of a presidential election, unless you're Donald Trump, who's in the primary in a presidential election, you're rarely going to have a positive outcome from your debates. So you have to think about this from a cost benefit analysis, and you have to create criteria for what you're going to do and what you're not going to do so that it doesn't become a huge time suck. And that's what can happen. If you end up with 20 debates, that's what you're doing. You're doing debates. You're not running an election. You're not
Yeah.
running a campaign. You're doing debates. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're because they are so much downside. If you were to blow yourself up in the debate, you can't. If you're in that many debates, you can't take it lightly. You need to have some kind of system, which we'll talk about in a moment, as to
Yeah.
how to prepare for them. So what you want to do is you want to reduce the amount of time it takes, or have other activities that you're doing also benefit your preparation for the debate. Is my humble opinion on that.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things to kind of look at here is the factors. You basically want to do a cost benefit analysis of, is this worth it? And so you
Mm-hmm.
want to ask yourself some basic questions. Will any of your persuadable voters be watching or listening? I think that's really the first one to get to.
If you're in a general election and you are going to, well, I don't know, some 80% Republican county and you're a Republican candidate, you're in the general election, and it's like the Republican Women's Auxiliary that's putting it on, and they have about 15 people show up at their meeting. It's not going to be televised, or maybe someone's going to put it on Facebook Live or something like that. That's what's going to happen, which is probably actually a downside because not very many people are going to see it on the Facebook Live, but it will be there for your opponent,
Yeah.
the Democrat, to go and take and download and use if you say something stupid. And that's likely going to be a real detriment to actually do that debate, even though you think, oh, my opponent's not going to show up and I get to stand there next to an empty podium. It probably isn't worth you doing that.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think so. You really want to look at that and be clear about who's going to be there. And sometimes you're going to have to ask the organizers those questions, like what's being done to actually get people either to this or to watch somewhere, or if you included the local TV media, like what's going on to actually
Mm-hmm.
broadcast this out. And then, do you have the ability to capitalize on your successes or blunders from your opponent? So this is another thing. There are some of these debates that get put on by a debate commission, which is great because, in one respect, because you're going to get rules and whatnot. But then sometimes they have the rule like you can't use any video from it. So now you got to get it into some other. You got to make sure somebody else is covering it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this debate commission is televising this debate at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday. I mean,
Most likely it is.
yeah, and who's watching? So
Even in a U.S. Senate race or a gubernatorial race, when the networks in like the big city do a debate, they're like, oh, the main anchor is going to do a debate and it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be televised. Well, oftentimes it's going to be televised on their secondary channel. I don't even know what you call them, but when you're watching actual broadcasts, if anybody does that anymore, they have like the extra channels on the channel, like the
dot
20,
two and
yeah,
dot three.
yeah, all those. So they're putting it actually on that channel, and they're doing it on Friday night at 9 p.m. And that's the debate, and it's the televised debate, and everybody gets all in a Twitter about this, but they don't actually nobody actually sees it,
Exactly.
or it's being live streamed or something like that. And, nobody knows that this TV station has a live stream. That's typically what's going to happen. There's very few times where it's actually put in a broadcast at a time in prime time when people would actually be watching. In these days, honestly, even if it were to be put into prime time television, there's so many other things you can watch. You're still only going to get a very small portion of the electorate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing, so other factors, we mentioned one before, is does this elevate you in your candidacy, or level the playing field, or is it something that could be a detriment to your opponent?
Mm-hmm.
And really getting that. So this goes into some of the things that we've done before, like SWOT analysis and the you on you and the them on you and the you on them and the them on them. So
For
getting
instance, if you had Eric Greitens as an opponent right now, and there was a debate, someone wanted to have a debate in the next day or so, then you would definitely want to jump on that. Well, people are going to cover it. I don't know. I'm going to send this out. So actually, if you go and you text me at 202-918-3345, after the show, I'm going to send out the interview that Eric Greitens did, former governor of Missouri, is a really good test case for how not to do an interview. His interview with Hugh Hewitt. I don't know if you saw that, Sean, but
yeah,
it was a disaster. He couldn't answer a single question, and it was like he never knew that these were going to be questions that were going to be asked. So getting that guy on the record in a debate in the next few days would be like a godsend for any of his opponents. Like you would be able to put that guy away quickly. But I'll be sending that out after the show. So if you go to you go and text us, we will make sure that you get that. I want to point out that Pat, I think, is I don't know if he's commenting on your age. I don't know which Taft he's referring to, if it's from 100 years ago in the presidential debate, or if he's talking about the former governor. But Pat says, Sean, do you remember the Taft debates? I think it's because your birthday was last week and you're awfully old now. But I think
I am awfully old,
way.
and I assume he's talking about the gubernatorial debates. And I can assure you that those have not been saved to for any coaching one way or the other. They were pretty bland both ways. It was just kind of ho hum.
Who did Governor Taft run against? I don't remember. It's been a long time ago now.
Tim Hagen in 2002, and he was married to a former star of Star Trek or one of those things. Anyway, it was the whole thing was bizarre. But and now his opponent ended up he was a Cuyahoga County commissioner and ended up in some legal trouble after that. So
he being Taft.
No, he being Tim Hagen. So Taft won 60-40. It was kind of a
who also ended up in trouble later.
They all found a way.
I forgot he wasn't in Cuyahoga. He was on the other side of the state. That was where his problems originated from.
Yes.
Oh, there's so many interesting stories through the years, and you get them here. This is these aren't the fresh political trade secrets. These are the old stale ones, but they're still funny in some cases. So it's good that we bring them up. Well, keep going with your the SWOT analysis. I just wanted to make sure that people got Pat's comment there.
We're going to get into the other factors here of the cost-benefit analysis in just a second. But if you're thinking about running for office and you aren't sure what things that you need to be considering, then reach out to us at Olson Strategies. We'd love to have that conversation with you. Are you thinking about running for office? You want to know how to be the best political leader you can be? Or do you really want to elevate your campaign and your game? Reach out to us. It's what we do. It's what we love to do. So reach out to us. You can visit us at olsonstrategies.com. That's OLSON strategies.com. You can email me, Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We'd love to have that conversation with you and get started on that today.
That's excellent. Our answer is no and maybe. Yes, if you're running for president and you're in the general election, that's my really clear answer as to answering the question, do debates matter? But the truth is I've done a lot of debates, and I would say we've had a number of our higher level candidates who are in real debates say that by far our process for debate prep and communications prep in general is the most robust and effective for having people be trained to be able to think on their feet. So if you're in a competitive race and you are going to end up being out there in front of the cameras, you're going to end up being out there in a debate. At some point, we make it the least painful as possible. We also make it fun. We also have you just be so much more prepared than most people are going into these sorts of things. So do check us out there. But let's keep going with this, Sean.
Yeah. Well, another factor to take into account is this something that appears or is being, quote, forced upon you?
Mm-hmm.
So we've run into the situation, right, where it's not like, hey, can you participate in a debate? It's here's the date of the debate. Everybody else has said yes, so you're going to be there, right? And you don't know anything else about the debate.
Mm-hmm. Or if it is in fact
True.
a debate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So so debate is a word that gets thrown around, and it can be referring to many things. So you need to get what they actually mean by a debate
Mm-hmm.
when they're organizing it. And sometimes they don't know. So that's something to really
Well,
get.
I think more and more these days. This is something that candidates get pulled around all the time. Some group, some chamber of commerce, some Rotary, some you know party auxiliary is going to have a debate because they want to be relevant themselves. That's ultimately what's going on. Is they want to make sure they want to be relevant. By the way, I've thought about hosting some debates on political trade secrets, maybe for party chairs and whatnot. So just so you know, the only reason we would do that is for the benefit of political trade secrets. For anybody who watches this episode, you'll know the joke if we actually do set one of these up. We'd be doing it because it helps get political trade secrets out there and everything else. We'd
Yeah.
also do a much better job of doing a debate for party leaders than anybody else because we have worked with so many. But just so you know, just for those of us in the middle of this show, we know you already know the punchline is that it's ultimately the organizers are the ones who get the most benefit
Yeah.
out
Well,
of.
you've probably been in this situation too before, Dustin, where maybe the organizer is somebody that is a supporter of yours or your opponents, and so not only are they setting it up, but they go, "Oh yeah, you know, what is the format you want?"
Mhm.
Or they're catering to the format that your opponent wants. So really getting
Pat has a good comment here. That's especially true if you're going against the incumbent.
yeah, absolutely right, absolutely right. So you want to be clear on that and take a look and say, huh, is everything as it seems, or is there something afoot? So you want to know that. But
Mhm.
you want to get what an organizer means by debates. Many times they say debate and they mean a forum, which is no Q&A, and you get up there and there's going to be some hints about this. They're going to say come to the debate, and it's from 6 to 9 p.m. 6 to 9 p.m. That's an awfully long debate. And oh yeah, you're going to be there, and then we're going to have candidates from all the other races. Okay. And then they're going to tell you, oh yeah, and and you get 10 minutes. Well, that's not a debate. I can tell you that right now. You're
Yeah.
going to get up to 10 minutes to speak.
The reason why this is important to know is that, well, one, you just need to be there for the 10 minutes when you're going to speak. So if they don't tell you the time, you have to have, your scheduler, your campaign manager needs to make sure that you find out the exact time when it's going to be. It might be worthwhile going to, if you're already going to be in the area. We talk a lot about comprehensive campaigning to make sure that if you're going to this county, that you also are going to be talking with, maybe if they don't have any press showing up, you stop by the local paper and at least say hello to a couple of the reporters. You have a sit down with a possible donor, or maybe you even have a fundraising event in the area, and you do something with your volunteers. Maybe you kick off a door knocking, blitz or something. You have a little bit of each part of the campaign is being benefited, and then you show up maybe 10 minutes before you're supposed to speak. Then you speak, and then you leave, and that's it, and you
Yep.
move on, and you have maybe another supporter there, or your campaign manager, your communications person is there for the whole thing, watching what happens with your opponents. Maybe Pat mentioned trackers earlier. That was a nice addition, because most of the time if it's an important race, trackers will be there. Trackers will be there even down to local, like legislative races,
Yep.
if it's for all the marbles. If you have a state where the majority is like a couple seats, and you could possibly, flip the state senate or the state house, there will be trackers even for that. Most likely from the left. Republicans don't seem to have as much money for such things. We also don't have George Soros, who funds most of the trackers out there. And they have done a pretty good job. There's a couple different groups out there that they have trackers everywhere, and then they go back and they download it and they catalog it. And their intention, and they've been doing this for about a decade, or maybe even more than that, that they have been intending to have a whole library of information on Republican candidates. And that's what they're doing.
It really started back in 2006 with Senator Allen from Virginia.
Yeah.
And he got caught on camera saying something that that was considered insensitive, and the rest was history. It wasn't even necessarily a race people were considering, and then things just kind of switched there. So that's one thing to look at, and I think that's really great in the comprehensive campaigning and what you're kind of looking at there. You want to be very clear on that. On
this topic of forums, let's read Alex's comment here. She says, forums can be great. It can be a great experience depending on the organization hosting. For example, a forum where you get to talk with police service members, and then they end up endorsing you. There's different kinds of forums that'll be invited. Those organizations are most likely going to be professional, and they're going to make it really clear it's a forum. You're going to come and you're going to speak to their members, and their members are going to then vote on whether they're going to endorse you. So it's really just being clear about what's going on. The reason why this is so important, if you think you're going to a debate, well, you need to buckle down and actually practice. It's going to be, and you're also going to want to make sure that you rest before the debate, and so on and so forth. If it's a forum, it's an opportunity to speak and to connect with people that way. The preparation is going to be different, and it's not going to be as much of a cost on your time in the campaign. So if you were unclear, you could easily waste a lot of time the week of that forum thinking it was a debate.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so you've got the traditional forum format, which is basically people speak and then the next person speaks, and there's not really much else. Then there's kind of this basically a forum, but sometimes they either take a question from the organizer or they take questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got to say, okay, well, who is this audience? And in your race, do you really want to leave it to chance, or do you want to make sure that the question you get asked gets asked? And I'll give you an example of this. We were talked about how opposition research gives you hints on how people tick.
Yeah.
Well, we had a campaign once where we knew that we had a bunch of issues, which were 70 or 80% issues. And we knew we had a candidate who was going to be contrarian no matter what, just couldn't help it, psychologically couldn't help it. So we said, look, we had mail pieces designed and ready to go, and we just needed a quote to tag on there. So we knew a forum was coming up, and so we made sure we had somebody in the audience, because they were doing this audience format. We said, you have to be the first person to ask a question. And you just got to go ahead and ask it. They got it asked. And sure enough, the candidate said, oh no, I'm not for whatever that 80% issue was. And we already had the tagline, like where it was said, and we were ready to go. Mm-hmm. But there's a prime example of knowing the rules and being able to say, okay, well, we want to make sure we know what question's going to be asked, because this is one that's favorable to us. It's one that makes sense in that format and forum, and you can get somebody to ask it right away. So,
This is another way that it can be a drain on a campaign if you have too many of these things that you agree to, is that you're going to want to bring your full game to these sorts of situations. If they're going to have audience questions, that means your political operation is going to need to turn people out. It is it is a real challenge for a campaign. I remember, I think it was um, so I managed Bob Beaupre's campaign, his second campaign for governor, but his first campaign for governor in 2006, they did something like 20 debates or 30 debates, some ridiculous number. And they had a debate like almost every other day. And the political operation pretty much spent all of their time turning people out to debates, debates that nobody was paying attention to and nobody uh, really covered. Yet they had the campaign spending a lot of time turning people out, and that's something that can happen. You know, you say yes to one debate, and you end up with every organization, and it's really tough for a campaign to say no to people. That's really what's at the effect here, is that it's hard to say no to people, and you get yourself put in positions that aren't great for you. That's oftentimes what's happening. Oh, we can't make this group mad, so we're going to say yes to this thing that could end your campaign or become a huge time suck for your campaign.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it really does. It takes all. So debates really can take all sides of your operation. It political, communications, uh, your management, the campaign manager, and your consultants, some other stuff that might be going on there, and then it is also a drain on fundraising because the time's going to have to come from somewhere to do this, and there's plenty of
Six to eighty
candidates.
percent of your campaign is going to be fundraising. You know where it's coming from.
Yep, exactly. So you really want to be, again, this goes into the cost benefit analysis, and there really is one big cost benefit analysis when you're
Mm-hmm.
determining this. And then you got to know the rules of the game. We talk about this on the show a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Here, there's a lot of questions. Who's the moderator? Who's organizing the event? Uh, are the questions known ahead of time? Are there opening and closing remarks? How long do you have to answer? Are there rebuttals? And you're like, hey, wow, that's a lot of questions. I never even thought about that. Well, guess what? We're about 3/4 of the way through the questions here. Is it in person or in Zoom? A brand new question that wasn't asked 2 years ago, I'll tell you that.
Yep.
Um, will there be audience questions, which we were just talking about? Will you be standing or sitting? And that's one that people don't think about. And particularly, you know, is this table going to have a skirt around it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, even questions like that you gotta ask depending on who you
Because
are.
you have to be aware of your presentation.
Yeah,
If you are a female candidate, that's a pretty important thing to know. And it's also, you have to be mindful of how you're holding your legs and things like that. There's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have thought about that you would need to. If you are sitting there with your foot tapping while you are sitting there, and there's no skirt on the table, you are going to give away. It's going to be like George H.W. Bush looking at his watch, that you're
hmm
nervous and uncomfortable. So you could be communicating a lot of stuff. It also ends up being a lot lower energy for the debate, typically, if you have people
yeah,
seated. That being said, if you have a big physical difference between the candidates, it can actually be a good way to reduce that. Or you can do a little stand, a box that people, sometimes a shorter candidate will use a box that they stand on, and you then have to be mindful. This is why you really need to lean forward with these, with the debate. These are questions to ask, or they're questions to maybe not even ask, but even might be demands. Like, these are things.
yeah,
This is how we'd like it to go, because if you have a candidate who's huge, like, think of the governor of West Virginia. I think he's like 7 foot tall. And then you have, someone who's like 5'5", and they're going to be next to this person. you're going to want to either have them further away on the stage, if it's on a stage. You might want to have the shorter person on a box, but you're also going to want to talk about camera angles and
Yep.
know that there's going to be certain kind of camera angles that aren't going to show the big difference in stature.
Yeah. And so, and by the way, you're going to ask these questions, and we mentioned it before. These are some things that the organizers likely haven't thought about.
Mm-hmm. These
Uh,
days, when if it's barely even a debate, which is what most cans are going to get, they're going to ask stuff, and it gets kind of contentious sometimes.
yeah. Well, and because you don't want to enter a game where you don't know the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and we've seen this, where the rules kind of get made up during the event,
Mm-hmm.
particularly with Zoom events that were happening. Like, oh yeah, I guess we should mute everybody else and then unmute, and it's like, whoa, what? You're gonna so like now the control is on one person to be able to determine who's weighing in and who gets to say
Mm-hmm.
what.
These
And
Zoom. First of all, Zoom is not the greatest product. I mean, it's an okay product, but um, Zoom. If you are doing a debate through Zoom, I remember we had a debate where this old guy was just coughing and hacking during the debate, and the Zoom was the whole time going to this guy because that's how it does. Whoever's making sound, it goes to that person, and it keeps showing them on camera. So this old guy's just hacking and coughing, and so every time he does that, the camera goes to him. It was completely disruptive to everybody else, which it didn't make him look good. However, if you were in there to be a ringer and like mess up another candidate, you could totally do that by making sounds. It's a terrible format for a debate.
absolutely. So you just got to keep in mind. I mean, there are a lot of questions that you're going to have to answer, and you really want to know the rules of the game before you get in there because it's going to determine really the last point here, which is debate prep.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to, and I think you've referred to this as reducing the cost on your campaign and creating systems around debate prep. And so say a
Yep.
little bit about the cost of the campaign.
Well, first, before we go to that, Pat has a lot of great stuff
Oh,
to
wonderful.
add to this. He mentions in a campaign he did, Jerry Brown dictated our rules, and I went at the moderator because he caved. That is going to happen sometimes. The incumbent is going to have more clout with, even if it's like the top media people, and if the governor or the senator says that it needs to be done this way, oftentimes they're having the conversations with the media earlier. Of course, if they're a Democrat, I mean, we don't need to bitch about the rules and just how reality works these days. Republicans are probably going to have less of an upper hand in most of these situations if it's a media that's doing it, or if it's the um, League of Women Voters, or Women Vipers, as Rush Limbaugh used to call them. That's not a just nice group that is nonpartisan. That's a very, very, very partisan group. But they're gonna have the rules be leaning to one side or the other, and you might actually have to uh, go to actually take on some of these things. You want to do it as nicely as possible, but you don't want to put your candidate into a tough situation if you're a campaign manager. If you're in a real, like a big campaign, like what Pat's mentioning, you are likely going to be having the campaign managers with the communication directors actually going into kind of the negotiations. Sometimes it also makes sense to, as we're talking about the cost, reducing the cost of your campaign, before we get into some of the systems, and that's what I would think about how to do this and reduce the costs is by having systems. One of the ways that you could reduce the cost on the campaign, it's very likely that your opponent doesn't want to do a lot of debates either. So you could actually, and I've done this on campaigns where myself as a campaign manager or myself as a general consultant has sat down with the general consultant or the campaign manager of the other campaign, and we worked out a framework for debates. We're going to do 4 debates, 5 debates. These are the groups we'd like to do them with. These are the groups that you'd like to do them with. We kind of split the baby, and we end up with these groups. Or we have a rule, it has to be a media organization or something like that. But that actually can be a way to reduce the cost on your campaign. So creating systems, though, this is an opportunity for you to develop yourself as someone who can think on your feet, who is able to communicate your vision and your message clearly. So you actually, to reduce the cost on your campaign for the week of the debate, whenever you actually have a real debate that actually is something you want to do, if you are always doing communications prep and communications practice that is geared towards real life, real world situations, you are going to be in the best situation possible. It's like the difference between cramming for the test and having studied throughout the semester. It's just going to go a lot better for you. You're going to feel a lot more comfortable.
And the truth is, being able to answer things in 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 2 minutes, not just for debates, but for really any media and really any conversations you're having, like, it is going to be critical. So having that, and it doesn't have to be a big block of time each week, but have it where you've got a little bit of time in there to really make it work. You'll go
Yeah,
along.
if you do like 45 minutes a few times a week, and you actually have the communications director, you maybe have the campaign manager sit in every once in a while. The way we like to do it is we like to have all the, and Pat, another great comment, break out the murder board. So we break out the murder board and we call it the pepper drill. And we have folks in the room who are going to be asking tough questions of the candidate from all the different angles that you could possibly ask. And you want to ask it from different angles that maybe they've never even thought about it. And you actually give them a lot of tough questions and you let them answer. And you start off the session like, what is it that you want to communicate? What is your vision? What is it that the contrast that you want to present using the Olson strategy sweet spot, using the the strengths, weaknesses matrix, and so on and so forth. Like having it really clear, like what your strategy is, like what is the choice that you're trying to present to people, and then having every single time you get asked a question, answer the question quickly, and then pivot to the answer that you want to give. By the way, in the Eric Greitens interview that he did, and just completely, I don't know why he's running anyway. He has a lot of baggage to deal with, but it was really clear that someone had not really worked with him, or maybe they have and they did a bad job, but he resisted the questions. And as we say here, what you resist persists.
Yep.
He made the questions bigger and bigger and bigger by pushing on them and not being willing to answer them. If he had done a quick answer that didn't really make any news and didn't repeat the charge and then move to what he wanted to say, he would have taken a lot of the energy out of the questions. So
Yep.
if you text me 202-918-3345, I'll send out the video so you can see how not to do that. But in the communications practice, you want to let them, like Roger Ailes did, let Reagan be Reagan. When they did the pepper drill, he would ask all these different questions and just let Reagan answer. And only if there's a complete actual, like, if you said that in public, you would end your campaign. You just let them speak. You don't interrupt, because you want them to have confidence to be able to speak and think on their feet and keep doing it. And here's the thing: if you've said something 1,000 times, you're going to be able to say it under the hot white lights of a debate stage. It's going to be a lot easier for you to do it that way. So having it done regularly, that you're going to do communications prep, because it's going to help you prepare for media interviews. It's going to help you prepare for tough questions from donors or from voters. It's just going to have you be more prepared for that. Also, you're going to be, if you use your call time for fundraising to quickly state why you're running for office, and you can do it in 30 seconds to a minute, and you do that over and over and over again, thousands of times, you're going to be able to do it when you're on the stage being in a debate. You're going to be able to say what your positions are quickly. So why don't you go to the next item that you would have for debate prep and guidance you'd give?
Yeah. So look, you want to focus on your vision and you want to really live into that. So, and you mentioned it, I think you really led into this well, because the things that you have said 1,000 times are the things that you can easily remember out there. So if you are thinking about it, you're sharing it a lot, And so we actually say that, fundraising calls can be a form of practicing your communication
Hmm.
when you're sharing what it is that you see as possible for your district, for the country, because of your service. So really want to you want to focus on that. You want to be living into that.
In
Uh,
fact, in fact, if you don't treat it as though it's communications practice, because no matter what it is, if you're saying things in your fundraising calls that you wouldn't say in public or don't meet your message, whatever you're going to say when whatever kind of communications you're doing a lot of, whether it's talking to your family or whoever, that's what's going to show up when you're under the hot white lights of the debate stage,
that's
or if you're on a TV interview. That's what's going to show up is the stuff that you've said over and over and over again, because it's what's ingrained in you. It's what you think ultimately, or what you are practiced anyway at saying. So that's what's going to show up.
Yeah. So you really want to just keep honing that, and that's what you get to do in fundraising calls, and it's going to be stuff that shows up in the communications practice. So you want to just keep on that, and then don't get bogged down in the statistics. This is not a thesis on who's got the better white paper
Mhm.
on even if it's job creation. Like, no one wants to get into the 10-point plan of whatever. So don't do it.
Mhm.
And people just want to know that you're competent on something. And
You can
it's
say, go to my website to download the plan. That's
yeah,
probably the best way to do it, to get people to go to your website. And they know all it is saying, I have some detail. You can find it if you want to. And
yep,
people will just take it at face value that you have some detail.
yeah. And it's one of the reasons. Pat brought up "Where's the Beef" earlier.
Mhm.
People didn't actually want to be given all the layers of whatever was going on. They just weren't interested.
Mhm.
You know, and and it would have been effective if then President Reagan decided, oh gosh, I really need to get into the details and share it, and then you get to nitpick at the details. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just that just
Wasn't
doesn't.
it Herman Cain had the 999 plan? Was that what it
Yeah,
was?
yeah,
It was all people knew is that there's three nines together and there was a
yeah,
plan. And some people were like, that's great. He has a plan. It has a bunch of nines in it. And I don't know what that's about, but I like it.
yeah,
And I think it was about taxes, of course,
yeah,
at the time. One of the things that you would do with the campaign is one of the things I do anyways. I get all the communications staff. I get everybody who pollster, anybody who I can think of to begin writing some questions. What are the questions that you think might come up in this campaign? And we will do a thorough battery of all the different kind of questions. And then I'll spend some time and I'll ask people to ask questions in multiple different ways. And when we do the murder board, we're going to use all those different questions. But we're also, as we do like the strengths weakness matrix, we are trying to come up with where are all the different places that we're going to possibly get asked a question. We had our program with Najee Falali, the opposition researcher, a couple weeks ago. That's a really great place to go and look. What are the different things that people are going to wonder about? What could come up? If you've done your own vulnerability analysis, you will know where your possible problems is. I think that's something Eric
yeah,
Greitens did not do, and he should have done, because it would have made a big difference for him to have the ability to quickly answer the question and then uh, pivot to what he wanted to talk about or to reframe it. That's
yeah,
ultimately what he needed to do, and he wasn't prepared for that. So you're gonna have to think about your both your defensive and your offensive strategy. I call it the two swords technique. You want to be having an offensive strategy and a defensive strategy in a debate, and you want to have everything that you really need to know. It needs to be on one piece of paper for a candidate. What are the issues that you want to hit? What are the things you want to mention? You may or may not have notes. That's one of the questions I don't think we mentioned, but whether or not you can have notes. You want to have a few things that you want to have on there, and you want to ultimately know what the contrast is that you're going to present to people. Now, one of the things that we also do is we do our context creation. That's something we do that's unique. We get what is the who is my audience and who are they to me, and actually creating a filter for how you're going to relate to your audience, and then we create the intentions for how you want to leave your audience, from having experienced this debate. And then in order to leave them that way, who are you being? And this is like 1, 2, or 3 ways of being. And this becomes a filter that everything goes through. I'm being confident. I'm being whatever it is. And then that's all you really have to remember is that like who I'm being in this debate is I'm being um, inspiring or whatever it is. And you just keep coming back to that. It becomes like a North Star, and your words and your posture and everything else will be in alignment with that. You don't have to remember 1,000 things.
Yeah. It's a great point. You really want to just simplify, simplify, simplify,
Mm-hmm.
um, and because people are not going to necessarily remember a lot from this. Hate to break it to you.
Mm-hmm. They'll
So,
remember your way of being. That's what they're going to
yep,
remember. Oh,
yep,
that person was being confident, or that person I found them inspiring. Oftentimes, however you say you're going to be, like the way of being. We've done this before doing video shoots, and it's amazing to us that when we have the candidate actually say, who I'm being is XYZ, inspiring, strong, understanding, or whatever it is, people will watch whatever it is that we recorded and they'll say, she really comes across as strong, or he really comes across as inspiring. They will actually repeat whatever it was the candidate said that how they were going to be in that recording. It's amazing. It seems like it's magic, but it really isn't. It's just simplifying it so you're not trying to be in your head and think about all the things you have to do. There's just one thing, there's just one way of being, and everything else is going through that filter, and it just makes it a lot easier than it would be otherwise. Alex asked this question: how should you respond in a debate when you are personally attacked by your opponent? Well, this is a great question based on what I just said. If
yeah,
if you have your clear ways of being, that's where you're standing, that's how you're being in the debate, that's going to impact how you respond, because you're going to get attacked. And also having it be a personal attack, I would actually deal with that before you go on stage. You are getting into the boxing ring.
mm-hmm.
You are going to take a couple of punches to the face. That's just what's going to happen. And if you aren't, then it wasn't much of a boxing match. So you should they're doing what they're supposed to do in a debate, which is um, have a couple body blows. That's what their job is. And if they don't, you could actually reframe it for yourself that that's disappointing. They clearly weren't a worthy opponent. So when the personal attack comes, don't take it personally. It is simply they're punching in the boxing ring. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly right. And so you really want to focus on that, what you were just talking about, that way of being, and as a standard response. There really is no standard response, depending on what the attack is, or and first, even just if you even have it as an attack. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that is another way to reframe it for yourself, and just kind of have maybe the way of being is calm, and like,
Yeah.
well, you know, um, whatever.
If your practice has a lot of murder board or pepper drill, as we've called it, and you're aware of all the different ways they might attack you, and you've been attacked in your actual preparation, and you've been doing this for weeks, you're always preparing for it, and you've been doing it for weeks, months, and they've hit you so many times, you become numb to the hits. So when someone says it, sometimes it actually can be a problem that you don't actually, at that point, it doesn't even bother you that much.
Yeah,
So you have to maybe even bring in a little bit of emotion in that moment to have some righteous indignation because of the attack. But if you've been prepped quite a bit, then it's going to be fine. Also, if you're trying to remember your response, that's going to be where you end up with the deer in the headlights look. So really being comfortable, fluent with how you'd respond to it, and even being how you'd respond to it with the emotion that you would want to bring with it would be appropriate for that question. If you've practiced that over and over again, it will come to you pretty pretty well. And Pat has a great reminder. Remember to smile. That's a really great reminder for anybody who's on camera, is to remember to smile. I will smile right now. Make sure I'm smiling. But no, it's really really important. Unless you're talking about something serious
Yeah.
and having a weird look on your face, like a big fake smile, it would make you seem a little bit crazy. That being said, if you're clear about your way of being, if one of your ways of being is being positive or being upbeat, that is going to have you naturally smile. You don't actually have to remember. You
Yeah.
actually just do it. So that's why we talk about way of being. It's something we do. It's a little bit different. And when we have a candidate who actually is able to kind of create that context for themselves, they are going to be so much more powerful. And when they become practiced with it over time, they can actually shift. After they've been attacked, they can come back and they can be positive. They can be upbeat. They can be inspired. Whatever they said they were going to be, they will be it. It's pretty remarkable to watch. And people will get that from body language, from the actual words they say. They will get all of it from their smile. They'll get all of that from it. There's a lot more we can say about this. We have we have a whole process for debate prep and for communications prep. If people are interested in working with us, this is something that we are pretty practiced at and have done a lot of. So you can go to our website, olsonstrategies.com, and you can set up an appointment by emailing either one of us. You've got the information there. Sean, any last thoughts that you have on just, do debates matter?
Yeah. Well, where they matter, again, it's really on, is your target audience actually paying attention, and are persuadable voters actually paying attention? Otherwise, you really want to be clear on what it is that you're going into, and powerfully saying no. That's one thing we didn't talk about, is you can say, you know what, this isn't going to work in my schedule, and just be clear with them about it. Like, this isn't that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why having a scheduler is important. So
they get to be the ugly face or the campaign manager. Let them
Yep.
be the one who says no. And you can be kind about it. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but it just doesn't work for you.
Yeah. And, that's their thing. And then when you're asked about it, say, I really want to do it. I'll ask them again, but, hey, they run the calendar. I show up.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm going to ask them again, because you don't want them to think there's an opportunity that it might come through. But if you this is what a candidate's going to go through. They're going to go through a fear of not being liked. That's what's going to jump up for somebody. And even if you don't think that's what it is, that's what it is. Even if you think you don't care about that, that's not true. You're a human being. There will be moments of fear of not being liked that's going to show up for you when you are in that moment. And I get that very much. So, one of the things I think that if an organization wanted to do one of these virtual debates, and they wanted to make sure that actually the people who really should hear about this know about it, something I recommend that they could do to actually get the people who actually matter to know about it is to actually text it out.
Absolutely.
And let people know. You can actually text the voters who need to hear about it a link before it happens to register, and then as it's happening, so they can just click on their phone and start watching. And how could they do that?
One of the best things that you can do is have your text, your political text, have value for the voter.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to thank you for it. So if you're an organization and you're like, you know what, I want to let people know that they can hear from all the candidates in one spot, and here's where you can do it. Very simple, and they'll thank you for it. And you can do that at 10centtexting.com. If you're a candidate, you want to be clearly getting out information about where and when and how to vote, letting people know that their ballots are arriving. We know that that's something that's happening in some states right now. So you want to be clear on that and get that out to them. They're going to thank you. Particularly if it's an election that's in a strange time. Special elections are going on right now. Some of these city elections are happening at times that you don't think about voting. That is one thing that you can do, and you can actually provide a service to the voters on the other end or your constituents. If it's spring everywhere now, spring cleanup and whatnot, and letting them know where, how the schedule's working for them stuff, all at 10centtexting.com. Get your message launched today.
If you're a local official, like what you just said, one of the most effective things we've seen recently was a text around waste management,
Yeah.
and voters really responded because it was useful information that they needed to have. I was shocked with something like an 85% open
Uh,
rate.
yeah, yeah. Out of all the 1 cent, and then even it so like upwards of the low 90s when you got into ones with once you got into to shutdown issues and whatnot with phone lines, and so truly remarkable. Like people got it, and they were like that. So it was really a great way to really connect with people, and they were appreciative. They said,
Mhm.
"Thanks for letting me know about this. I didn't even know about it."
Yeah, useful information. We talked about that yesterday with our 8 pro tips. And by the way, we did that because of the sponsor. And you can go download the 8 pro tips for political texting
Yep.
if you go to 10centtexting.com. If you are a candidate and you get caught up in one of these virtual Zoom debates, if you have the link to it, you could send it out as a candidate to your list as well. It's a lot easier than the old days when you had to get a bunch of people into the audience at the debate. You could actually just text it out to your entire audience or your entire list of supporters, donors, and whatnot. And that's actually something you should plan on doing. If you're sending it out to all the voters and you know it's going to be a good debate for you, well, the reason why you'd use 10centtexting.com is because of the call center at Grassfire has the
Yep.
capacity to send out 100,000 texts quickly. Because if you were to, the way it works is the FCC requires that every single text be sent by an individual. So they have to hit enter for every single text. You need a whole group of people who are set up to do that. Volunteers would not be able to get that out in the manner and the timeliness that you would need for that process. So definitely want to check out 10centtexting.com. We mentioned Grassfire at the beginning of the show. You can check them out at grassfire.us. Mentioned if you're interested in consulting services, you can go to olsonstrategies.com. You can check us out there. The information's there on the deal there. And then you can also text me personally at 202-918-3345. After the show, I'm going to send out the video to everybody on the list. The Eric Greitens, former governor of Missouri, now running for U.S. Senate, is a perfect example of what not to do if you're running for office or any kind of interview. It's going to be, you're not going to like either one of the people involved by the end of it, but he's not done himself any favors by doing that interview the way he conducted it. And it got a lot of attention. They even made national news. Normally in a Senate race like this, no one would even be paying attention. And he ultimately, I think, ended his campaign.
Well,
Maybe not.
Missouri Republican Senate candidates have a long history of conducting terrible interviews. So,
Yeah, in their chances. Uh, well, and I don't have a thought. I don't know him, and I don't really have a dog in that race. But it's just an interesting thing. I hope people find it valuable. But you can go and text us at 202-918-3345, and we will send that out here within about 30 minutes after the show. And one of the things I want to let people know about are some of our upcoming episodes. We are going to be doing. We're going to be doing a new series called The Shifting Politics of the Rust Belt. And we have a special show coming up in the next week. Sean, you want to tell people about
yeah,
that?
we're going to have former Congressman Jim Renacci on, who served Northeast Ohio, on to talk about how it's looked here in Ohio and some of the things that we've seen. And and there has been a shift in the Rust Belt politics, and it used to be that Pennsylvania and Michigan were like. Uh, Republicans were Charlie Brown, and they were Lucy holding the football.
Yep.
Um, and you're seeing a little less of that, and Wisconsin, in that, and you're even seeing things trending in Minnesota and things that just people aren't necessarily talking about, but you're definitely seeing that. So it's definitely something to focus on. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to his thoughts, and he's been in Congress. He's run for Senate. He has a really interesting background as a business leader,
Yeah.
and he was a Trump guy. I really think what he has in common with President Trump. So President Trump, in The Art of the Deal, he makes a big deal about having started the XFL or the whatever it was called at the time.
USFL. Yeah.
USFL, that's right. There's been so many XFL, AFL. Anyway, so Jim Renacci has a team or had a team in the AFL, and he's he's owned a number of sports teams, and I think that's what they have in common. Is I don't know if he hates the NFL, but Trump definitely hated the NFL. It's interesting in The Art of the Deal and a couple of his other books. Trump didn't want handshakes. Like he was like, we need to get rid of handshakes, and then he's like, we need to get rid of the NFL. And then as president, he effectively did both. Those are two things that most people don't really give him credit for. He really did get rid of handshakes, and he really did get rid of the NFL. I mean, I've only watched the Super Bowl at this point, and most people I know in my life, they no longer watch NFL games. So it's pretty amazing. He called his shot, and it's. Who would have thought a pandemic would happen and he would be able to get rid of handshakes? But that happened. So we have Jim Renacci coming up. Also have Michael Rechtenwald. If people want to get the books ahead of time, I'm going to send that out also today on the text. If you want to join us there, I will send out the links to the books as well. So this is really interesting. I finished it earlier this week, The Digital Gulag, The Simulation of Freedom. It's called Google Archipelago. It's really about a lot of the things that we're going to be doing some episodes on artificial intelligence and how it's affecting our politics, all the big tech companies and how they're impacting our politics. So that's going to be a really interesting episode. We have him coming up on April 13th, so you have time to read the book before that. And then on April 6th, we have Ultra Learning from Scott Young is going to be on to talk about that. And then we're going to have because everybody who runs for office, we just talked about an ultra learning process. Yeah. And actually, his book has impacted a lot of the ways that we do the training for our candidates and how we have people be able to go from 0 to 60 in a short amount of time. It's based largely on Scott Young's book on ultra learning, how to do ultra learning projects. Running for office is basically lots of different ultra learning projects together. And then we're going to have Maurizio Viroli, who is a professor at Princeton. I don't have his book here with me, but he's going to be talking about Machiavelli. And he wrote a book called Redeeming Machiavelli. He's also written a book on what you can learn about leadership from Machiavelli. He definitely has a more positive view than the general public does, but what you can learn from Machiavelli. So I think that's coming up in a week or so. I don't know the exact date, but that's going to be a fun show. So if you want to dust off your old copy of The Prince, you can check that out. And we're going to be able to ask him lots of great questions. What can modern leaders today, people learn from Machiavelli to be powerful political leaders now in a positive way? And he'll make that very clear. A lot of the stuff, I think he thinks there's a lot of fake news when it comes to Machiavelli, and he'll share that with us. So that'll be a really interesting conversation for that. Sean, anything else that you'd like to let people know before we wrap the show?
No, I really appreciate everybody listening and watching. Enjoyed the episode today, and look forward to our episode tomorrow as well. So come back and join us.
Yep, we'll be back at 11 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. This has been an excellent conversation. Thank you, Sean, for all of your insights and your thoughts. Really do appreciate it. People can go to politicaltradesecrets.com to sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider. Also, you can sign up to be part of the Share Force. Join, share force, make a difference, reignite American patriotism. That's what we're all about here. So thank you to everybody who shared the program. I think we're at like 85 shares for today. Thank you very much for doing that. It's really as simple as that, is sharing the program will help get the message out there, because who knows, there's some conservative out there. There's some American citizen who will be inspired by this conversation. Maybe they were worried about debates, and that was something that was keeping them from taking action. Like, how am I going to deal with this? And by seeing this program, they're more likely to step up, show up, speak up in their community, and be the powerful political leader that their community, their state, and our country need. And they can be a part of our movement to really reignite American patriotism. So thank you to everybody who does share the program and how you are making an impact by doing so. So with that, this has been another episode of Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.